Hi, ladies, and welcome to the module around training and nutrition recommendations for your menstrual cycle. So within this, what we're going to be discussing is based upon the current evidence and scientific research recommendations for your training and nutrition, and also how to track. So first of all, I thought it'd be great to start off with the fact that upon research, there's not enough sufficient evidence done on women to state exactly what is the right and wrong way to train or eat around your cycle, but we can give recommendations. The one thing that is agreed upon is how a female performs during the phases of their cycle actually varies between individuals, and an individualized approach is recommended. So how we can create an individual approach is by doing our own research on ourselves called me search. Now, this is the number one tool, right? Like anything we do, we want to take notice of what's happening on our individual journey, what's happening in our body and our life experience. So these sort of things we can start to track to start to understand ourselves at different stages of our cycle, which will impact our nutritional quality and cravings, our training performance, our training styles, our moods, everything of the sort. So things we can start to look at tracking is our bleed length and flow. So when we bleed in our menstrual cycle, spotting and discharge, body temperature as well. So you can track ovulation, same thing with discharge, our feelings and thoughts, pain or breast tenderness, sleep quality, performance quality, cravings, digestion, our stool quality, sex life, energy levels, PMS symptoms, social life or your social battery, skin and hair, exercise, alcohol, nicotine consumption, medication, stress levels, birth control, and supplements. Like all of these things we can actually start to track. And of course, we're not going to get you to do them all straight away. And within this, I'm going to be able to recommend you a few apps that have all these things inbuilt into it already. So it makes it very easy for you to just press a button. I personally think it's really great to be able to track this because the importance of understanding yourself is that you can make recommendations based upon where you're at in your journey. The thing is, what we commonly see as a mismatch between what is out there today and also what's your individual journey is that what works for one person may not necessarily work for another. And within this, we all have different experiences. Yes, women, we do have a menstrual cycle that may be similar in length, anywhere between 21 to 35 days, but what we experience will be very different for each individual. So that's why taking notice of what's happening in your body and doing me search is imperative for you to be able to make decisions based upon where you're at and give yourself options based upon where you're at as well and support yourself in your overall well-being. So how to discover what works best for you? There are many period tracking apps out there. There's Clue, there's Flow, there's Wild AI. I personally have used Clue and Flow. I've stuck with Clue for the past 4 years. I personally like it. It does everything I need. I can track all of those amazing things in terms of, bleed length, pain, skin, bloating, ovulation, all those sort of things I can track in that. Flow is also a good app as well, but you got to pay for it. I just use the free version on Clue, but you can also get the pro version if you'd like to as well. And within that, they always have nice sales from time to time too. So they'll all vary, and it's worth trialing to see which one suits you best. You can also track it in our app. And within this, it's not as fancy as these other apps, but it does have everything you need. So you can actually find that under results tracking in the app if you want to track this for yourself. You can also track it the old-fashioned way and write down daily what is important for you to track. The reason why I would recommend this the most, if you have the space to do this, is because if an app shuts down or the data gets lost, then you've lost that data. The greatest thing is that if you have it written in a book, you then have that book, and hopefully as long as nothing happens to that book, you've got a record of that for the rest of your life. So maybe you can do both if you wish. But what you want to essentially do as a minimum is track your cycle length, subjective personal comments, so maybe your bleed length, how you feel, and then maybe performance quality and any cravings, and then any external resources or internal resources you use to manage different stages of your cycle. The reason is some experience symptoms and some do not, right? So we're all genetically made differently, and also different environmental things impact how we feel each month. It's hard to take advice on how to train specifically for you what I encourage is that over these next few slides, I'm going to be taking you through the recommendations based upon on the latest scientific and evidence-based research, but you also need to apply what is specific to you, right? And this is going to come through trial and error. And the only way to do this is by understanding how your body works. So if you're not already tracking your menstrual cycle, I recommend to start doing that so you can start collecting your data. And within that, you're able to then make decisions based upon what's best for you. If someone is telling you to specifically do X, Y, and Z around your cycle, it's important to take that with a grain of salt and still apply things to find what works for you. Because like I said, we're all different. And, for example, like some people might be like, you can keep training significantly and hard throughout your whole cycle. But for some people, you may actually find that you need like a week of rest and low intensity, right? It's going to be different for each individual. And maybe someone says, hey, take a week of rest towards, when you bleed, but you're like, I actually have the energy to keep training, right? So everyone's going to be different. So it's really important to find how you work so you can make decisions based upon what is best for you. So that's the best tool. The best tool is noticing your own individual journey. So now we're going to have a little chat about recommendations based upon the latest evidence and scientific research for training and nutrition around your menstrual cycle. So you can take a screenshot of this. This is obviously more in depth, and I can send you the links as well if you want to see the scientific studies. But the first part we're going to speak about is the follicular phase. So this is from when we first bleed up until ovulation when we release an egg. This is days 1 to approximately 14. So this is where we start to see estrogen build. Estrogen is great because it helps in terms of regulating our appetite, thickening and growing our muscles. It also allows us to become more insulin sensitive, which helps regulate our blood sugar levels and also utilize carbohydrates better. And then also we see energy maintenance, mood stabilization, and our recovery time is also quicker, which is absolutely amazing. So within this, what we can say based upon the research is that this is the time to go for personal best. This is the time to push yourself in your training because you can recover better, you've got more energy, and you're able to utilize carbohydrates as fuel, which is great, right? So what we want to do is that in these times, after we finish the bleed and before ovulation, this is where we want to go for our personal best. We want to be working really hard in terms of our strength training, or we could also, do some more max efforts in terms of like, whether it's cardiovascular training or whatever it is, or try something new, right? So this is a really great time to be able to do this if it's within your ability to do this as well. Of course, we still want to maintain like our recovery, like our stretching and taking days off and all those sort of things. This is the time where you can really push, right? Based upon what we see in terms of estrogen being a key player for muscle growth, better recovery, and also in terms of better carbohydrate utilization. What we can see in terms of nutrition is that one, as well as estrogen being higher, is that we are able to become insulin sensitive, which is great, keeps away insulin resistance, which means that we're able to utilize carbohydrates better and balance out our blood sugars and maintain a balanced energy and mood stabilization, which is great. But also it can work as stabilizing our appetite regulation. So our hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin, are more stabilized, which means that you may feel less hungry because we're feeling quite balanced within ourselves. So what we can see and recommend within this phase, this is one where if you're looking to do a fat loss phase, this is where you would be a little bit more aggressive in this phase because your body can handle it, right? This is where you're going to be able to stabilize your blood sugars much more efficiently. And this is where you can push yourself just that little bit more as well, right? So you can have a little bit more lower caloric intake. This is where your body will be able to handle it more effectively. So within this, you're able to summarize this as we're able to push harder in our training. We're able to regulate our appetite better. Our mood is more balanced. And within this, in terms of our nutrition, this is where we can implement a more aggressive or a more, intense fat loss phase, because in different phases, the recommendations are going to change. So what we can see and what we want is quality protein, quality fats, quality carbohydrates, and this is the best time to reduce your calories if in a fat loss phase. So this is the follicular phase, the first part of your menstrual cycle, days 1 to 14 or so. Now we speak about the ovulation phase. So this is when the body is releasing an egg, ready to be fertilized to prepare the body to carry a beautiful baby. So this is where estrogen peaks. This is where we're more insulin sensitive as well. Energy is higher, right? Our energy and endurance levels during ovulation are likely to be close to those of the follicular phase. So you'll be still experiencing, the desire and the ability to recover from high intensity activities. Now, what we can see is that once we enter the ovulation phase, estrogen starts to drop. So you might experience a day or two of where you maybe don't feel super strong. Within this, take it easy, right? Have a bit more of a longer endurance session and just lower intensity rather than trying to go for maximal power or like your personal bests. And within this can be something that can support you in that journey. So we speak about the training recommendations. So within that, that's just important to note. What we'll also see as ovulation starts is progesterone starts to rise as well. Now, progesterone has a key player in our breathing rate. And this means that when we breathe more, what can happen as well, depending on how we breathe, can potentially increase our heart rate and also our stress levels. What can also be supported towards this part of the phase and moving into the luteal phase in terms of training is more yin yoga or yoga practices that are nice and slow, more deep controlled breathing and relaxation techniques as well. So with nutrition around this part is that it doesn't actually change much from the follicular phase. We still want to have some quality proteins, healthy fats, more starchy carbs as we move into this part of the phase, so more fiber rich. And within this is where you'd potentially not do a part of a dieting phase, especially if you want to support towards becoming pregnant or just supporting this part of your cycle as well. Now, you can also keep moving forward in a fat loss phase if that's for you, if that's something that you would like to do, right? Because estrogen is a little bit higher, it does dip just after ovulation, but then slightly rises again. This is just something to be mindful of. So for that day, you could always increase your calories just a little bit. So within this as well, you want to be able to support this part of your phase by having more starchy carbohydrates, proteins, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, folic acid, vitamin D, antioxidants, and iron. So within this, you can actually have a look at the nutrition modules about understanding these and where to get these from if you'd like to support this part of your cycle as well. So now we're going to speak about the luteal phase. So the luteal phase is like days 15 to like 28 on average. This is essentially after ovulation occurs, after the egg has been released until a new cycle begins. So this is where we start to see progesterone build. So progesterone is in relation to progestation, so in terms of pregnancy, promoting the environment to be able to help grow the baby. But this is also where we start to see more insulin resistance, so less tolerance to carbohydrates. Our energy begins to decrease and recovery is slower. Now, this is where it's recommended in terms of training to do more aerobic efforts, more circuits and moderate activity. So this is where potentially you may not go for your personal bests, but you're still training with good intensity, right? Because you're not going to be at your strongest, but it's still important that you train within your realms. Now, what you can also see potentially is that the core body temperature starts to rise after ovulation, can affect how quickly you fatigue. So in terms of your performance, this may affect it based upon your current body temperature. And it also has been shown that in hot and humid conditions, this can be amplified. Now, depending on what works best for you, especially as we move into when estrogen and progesterone start to dip towards the end of the cycle when the egg hasn't been fertilized, it may be more impactful for you to be able to do like yoga or a nice walk or like low intensity bike riding as training and take it really easy in your weight training. So this might be where you just start to pull back the intensity and give yourself like a deload week or like a nourishment week where your body needs time to rest and recover, because essentially it's just getting ready to, I suppose, shed the uterus of the linings of what it's prepared for that baby to be grown when it hasn't occurred. So within this as well, something that's important is that we do become more insulin resistant, which is what I mentioned before, but this means that it has a harder time properly storing glucose. So the glucose uptake in muscles and fat cells is impaired. So what is recommended is that during the luteal phase, aerobic efforts, so like low intensity workouts, like, 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate are more advantageous because this will allow your body to utilize more oxygen throughout your training instead of it being more focused on carbohydrates because it's not going to be able to use it as efficiently as if it was in the follicular phase. So within this as well, it's important that, you listen into your body around this because, if PMS symptoms are quite prevalent and quite dominant, maybe you just need to take a little bit more easier. Maybe you need to focus on different types of training. Like you're going to find what works best for you. So in terms of our other little points that we want to add for the luteal phase is that an important thing around nutrition is that happy hormones, serotonin, and dopamine actually dip during this phase as well because estrogen drops. That actually has a relation, estrogen to dopamine and serotonin. And when this drops, so does serotonin and dopamine. And what we can actually start to see is the stress hormone cortisol starts to increase as well. Now, because of this, you may find that you're more hungry and have stronger cravings and have a lower mood. So within this is that, when these are all low and our cravings are higher, this can have us reaching for quick snack carbs. So what I personally recommend is that add a little bit more nutrition to this part of your cycle, right? Even if you are in a fat loss phase, because what we can also see is that our caloric needs also increase in this part of our phase. So anywhere between 5 to 10% on our basal metabolic rate can increase 100 to 500 calories more needed in this time. So within this, I'd recommend to increase your calories like an extra 100 to 500 calories during this time and allow yourself some of those things that satisfy those cravings. So give yourself permission in that time instead of trying to restrict yourself and just say, creating that relationship, like in that time, you honor it in the ways that you need so they can come up in different ways, but also allowing yourself to have that more energy because what can happen is that if our energy, our basal metabolic rate increases, but we're still eating the same as if we were eating in our follicular phase in the first part of our cycle, naturally we're going to be placed into a deficit. So, depending on what your goals are, it's still important that we do honor that little bit of an increase as well to make it things more sustainable and, work with the things in terms of cravings and appetite increases. So of course, this is going to be different to every single person. That's why it's important to track. But what I'd recommend in terms of nutrition based upon the science is that we still want to eat quality proteins to support our overall health, some higher fats, and more lower carb for this phase, aiming for more starchy carbs predominantly with more fiber if having any, and limit the ultra processed foods as this can cause inflammation before and during the bleed. So within this is where we don't want to stress the body more than what it really needs because the body is going through quite a lot. And, within this as well, it's always going to be based upon how you feel, right? So I recommend to take the data and find what works best for you. So to summarize this, because of course that was a lot of information to take in and you can take a screenshot for this if you'd like, is that during the bleed, take it easy, right? As hormones are still low, depending on how you feel, estrogen and progesterone is low. And, we want to be eating balanced, right? Supporting the body and nourishing the body with essential nutrients between proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and a good amount of fiber. But, you might find that you can train back to, a certain standard during your period, or maybe you do need a little bit of rest, right? That's why taking research on yourself is super important. Now, in terms of after the bleed into ovulation, this is where it's recommended that you can increase your training intensity, go for personal bests, as energy can be at its peak. You have better carbohydrate tolerance, so you can actually push harder in your workouts. You can build muscle more efficiently as well. And this is the best time to do fat loss calories as the body is more balanced in terms of appetite regulation. So within this is where you can push for a fat loss phase. And this will be where it's the easiest at this point, in theory, of course. Now, ovulation. As estrogen drops, so can your strength. So you can focus more on endurance or lower intensity training. But once again, this depends on how you feel, right? You can add in some mindfulness activities such as yoga, controlled deep breathing, and meditation to help with the increases of stress levels from progesterone starting to rise. So remembering that progesterone is a key player in terms of the breathing rate. What you can add in is some yoga or some controlled breathing or meditation to help mitigate these perceived stress levels that may increase. And also promoting balanced eating. So a good amount of protein, fats, and carbohydrates, opting for more starchy carbs in that aspect with some more fiber. Then we move into the luteal phase, which is where moderate activity is encouraged as a drop in hormones happen in the second part of the luteal phase, and the body is less efficient at utilizing carbohydrates. So estrogen is a key player in utilizing carbohydrates efficiently. When estrogen drops, this is when we become more insulin resistant. So this means that we predominantly use fats better as fuel rather than carbohydrates. So this is where we want to also do more moderate activity because it can utilize fat better. You want to have more rest days or low impact activities such as yoga, walking, and swimming if you wish. And that also depends on how you feel. More mindfulness activities as serotonin drops and cortisol increases. So nice deep breathing, yoga practices, and all of those sort of things. It's the best time to increase calories to maintenance or balance as our basal metabolic rate increases by like 5 to 10%. Or, if food intake can be controlled, this is where you can also still continue in like a fat loss phase if you wish with an adequate diet. But this also comes down to how well you're able to manage your appetite and food intake. Another great strategy is to increase food intake within this phase, an extra 100 to 300 to 500 calories per day to be able to support that extra energy increase, and also to help manage cravings because, when we increase our calories to match more of our energy, this may help with adherence and prevent any potential binges that may occur that may impact your body composition negatively and also how you feel within yourself too. By giving yourself permission in this time to know that your body's basic amount of energy it burns each day does increase, which means that our needs for energy intake also increases. Give yourself that little bit of chocolate if you wish, like whatever it is, allow yourself to have that to prevent those future potential binges. And also within this, what we want to aim for in terms of nutrition is quality proteins and fats, lowering ultra-processed foods to reduce inflammation, which might be challenging when the cravings are present, but within that, balance and moderation is always key. And we want to have lower quick release carbs and more starchy carbs to be able to support the balanced energy rather than quick highs and lows due to the body's inability to be able to utilize carbohydrates more efficiently and also with the drops in energy as well. But overall, you want to find what works best for you. And the reason is because even though I've given these recommendations based upon the latest research, everyone's going to be different. So it's really important that you start to create that for yourself and find what works best for you. Each month might be slightly different as well, right? So as you evolve, things might change too. So if you have any questions around this, feel free to let me know. You don't have to apply all these things straight away as well. This is more of like an information sort of thing, but I hope this helps as a guide as you start to track your cycle and maybe you feel certain ways and maybe you've got certain expectations to do something. Use this as a guide to give yourself permission to explore to find what works best for you. And that's super important because, like I said, you need to find what works best for you. I'm here to support that journey, but what works for you may not necessarily work for someone else. And that's always important to note. So I hope you enjoyed this module and reach out if you have any questions.